Hello guys, in this video I'll show you how you can create a contact us section like the one you see on your screen. If you have a single page website, you can include this contact us section close to your footer. If you have a dedicated contact us page, then you can add this section as part of your contact us page. And as always, we have the light version for the contact us page or contact us section, and we also have the dark version for the same contact us page. At the end of the day, I'll also share the code to this contact us form. So if that sounds interesting, let's get started. So right now I am in my VS Code, and the first thing that we want to do is to create a section. So this section, I'll just give it a PY of 16 just to create a padding top and bottom. And then inside this section, I want to create a div section. So this div section will be the main container of our contact us section. I'll give this div section the following classes. So I'll give it a maximum width of 6 XL, which gives it a width of 1152 pixels. That's maximum width. And then I'll also give it an MX of auto just to center it horizontally. And then I'll give it a padding of 16 pixels, but on medium screen sizes, a padding of 16. And then here, a padding of 80 pixels for large screen devices. After I've done that, I will start with the this section where we have the title and where we have the paragraph here. So let's do that. For the paragraph, what I'll do for the paragraph and the heading, what I'll do is to create another div, and this will contain the paragraph and the heading. So for the heading, I will give it the following classes. I will give it a text gray of 800 and then uppercase, so it's always uppercase, and then I'll give it a letter spacing. After I've done that, I'll give it a dark. For the dark version, I will give it a text white, and then I'll give it a font medium, which is font weight of 500, and then for the title, I'll give it a font size of 36 pixels. Now, since we want to have this with the dark version, what I'll do is I'll come here and give it a class, and I'll say dark. I'll give it a background color of BG 900 for the dark version. And then once I've done that, for this div that is containing the header and the heading and the paragraph, what I want to do is to give it the following classes. On large screens, I will make it have a width of 66%, and then I'll give it a space Y of 5, so it gives that spacing for every component that is inside. And then I'll center the text, but I'll also center the div with maximum auto, so it gives margin left of auto and margin right of auto. Once I've done that, like that, I will add the paragraph. So for the paragraph, I've given it a text gray of 400. For the dark version, I want the text to change to gray 300. And then I want to give it a text base, which is 16 pixels, and then a leading 6, which is the line height of 1.5 or 24 pixels. Now that I've done that, if I save this and open my code or open it in the browser, you see we have this. But now I don't want to have the dark version. So what I'll do is I will come at the top here and remove this class, the dark class, and remove the dark class. And then when I come here, you can see this is what we have. If you see the actual, the thing that we're creating, we have this line. So let me show you how you can create that. So for the line, I'll come here in between the H1 and the P tag. And then I want to add a div and give it a width. So here I'll add this div I've given it a height of 2 pixels, and then I've given it a background of LED 500, a width of 56 pixels, and then I've centered this. Now if I save this, you can see that we have the line here, and you can see that it has equal spacing. That is because we've given the main container here a spacing of 5 y, spacing y of 5. So that's that. Let's go to the next section. So for the next section, this section, what I've done is I have divided it into 2 sides. So basically there's this side, and then there's this side that has the form. In true sense, we have, I will create 3 columns. So the first column will handle this, and then the second and third column will contain the form here. So let's do that. I will cross this, and below this, what I'm going to do is to create a div. So I've created this div and given it the following classes. So I'll make this div a grid, and then for small screens, I will have only 1 column. And then for large screens, I want to have 3 columns. I've created a gap of 6 so that we have some spacing, and I've given it a margin top of 64 pixels. Inside here, I will start by creating the address section of the form. So for that, I will also start with a div, and inside this div, I'll create an address tag. And then inside this address tag, I will also have a div. Inside this div, I'll have a heading and a paragraph. So basically the heading right inside here will contain the office address, or the name of the office, and then this is the form, the name of the office, and then this is the styling. So I've given it a text base, which is 16 pixels, a font medium, a margin bottom of 8 pixels, dark. On dark, I want the text to change to white. So that's that. If I save this and go here, you can see that we've started here with that. So under this, I'll add a paragraph which will contain the details of this office or the location. So I've given this a text gray of 400. For the dark version, it will change to text gray of 300. And then for the font size, I've given it a text of SM, and then I've given it a font medium, which is a font weight of 500, and then a leading 5, which is a line height of 1, a line height of 20 pixels. Now that's that for the first office, and then let's do that for the second office and the third office. So basically it's just the same styling. So to not waste your time, what I'm going to do is to come up with this, and let's just go through it again. I've given it a margin bottom of 24 pixels, and then it's the same styling like the one we had at the top. And this is also the same styling like the paragraph we had on top here. So I'll just copy the last one. After I've done this, we can go to the forms section. After doing this, you can see that now we have the addresses here. Now, if you wonder, you will see that we want to have equal spacing between these things. So let's work on that. So to work on that, what I'll do is I'll come at this div, the first div that we created, and then I'll also add a class and give it a margin bottom of 6. Now you can see we have equal spacing. So the next thing that we need to do is to create the form here. So what I'm going to do is to close this, and then below this I'll create a div, and then for this div, what I want to do is to take 2 columns. So it should have a column span of 2. So if I do this, this will have 2 columns. So this will take 1 column, and this will take 2 columns. That's 3 columns. Inside here, I want to create a form. Inside the form, what I'm going to do is first of all to create a div, and give this a class of space y6 to create equal spacing between the elements, the child elements of this container. Okay, so inside this div, I will first of all start with this section. Now you can see this section has two inputs, and then when we inspect this, you can see that on small screens it takes the whole screen. So let's create it in that way. So to do that, what I'm going to do, so to achieve that, what I'm going to do is first of all create a div inside here that will contain the first two input fields. So for this div, I'll give it the following classes. I've given it a grid, and then I'll give it a grid columns of 1 for small screens, and then for medium sized screens and above, I'm going to give it grid columns 2, and then I'll give it a gap of 6, which is 24 pixels. So what I'm going to do is I will create two input columns, but you can see that these input columns don't have a label, but I will put a label. The only thing is I'll put the labels for screen leaders only. So let's do that. So here is my first label, and then the label is name for the input with the name value, and then you can see for the class I've just given it to be visible for screen leaders only. And then below here I will add my input. For the input I have given, you can see for the label I have given it a 4, and then given it a name, which is the name here, and then the ID name. So it indicates that this is for this input. And then I've given it a placeholder of enter your name so that it displays that as the placeholder. After doing that, what I'm going to do is to give it the following classes. And then if I save and go to the browser, you can see that we have this input. Now let's go and look into the classes themselves. I've given it a border, and then for the border I've given it a color of gray 300, and then for the text I've given it a text of gray 900. I've given it the font size of 14 pixels, and then I want it to have rounded corners. On focus I want to have no ring, so I give it a ring 0. And then on focus I want the border to change to gray 400. I'll give it a class of block, and then I'll give it a class of wfull to fill the whole width, a padding of 3, which is 12 pixels, and then on dark I want the background to be zinc 700 with an opacity of 0.2. And then on the same dark version I want the border to change to zinc 700, and then with an opacity of 0.5, which is 50 in Tailwind CSS. And then for the dark version I want the placeholder text to change to gray 300 with an opacity of 50, and then on the same dark version I want the text to change to gray 300 with also an opacity of 0.5. But you can see that this code for the input field will be repeated over and over for all our inputs. So what I'm going to do is to give this a single class of form input, and then once I've done that, I've saved it, you will see that this is how the input is looking. But now if I go here and then I look for our entry CSS inside here, our input.css, and then inside it I will add the form input. Now I've created my own utilities here, and then if I go back here, and you can see now it literally changes. So it has changed. So the good thing about this is we now have less code than what we had when we had all the classes here. So after doing this, what I'm going to do is to add the second form here. And then for the second form, inside here I will add another form here, and then the label is email, and then you can also see I've given it a class of SR only, and then I've also added here form input, so it uses the same classes that we created. Once I've done that and I go here, we'll see that we have this as well. And then the most important thing is to specify, since this is an email input field, we have email as the type, and then this is a text input field, we have text as type. That is very important. Once I've done that, I will close this section, and then down here I will create another input. Now this input is for this section, this enter your subject input. So I'll come here, and then you can see this is only for screen readers, and then I've also given it a type of text, I've given it an ID, and then form input plus the placeholder here, enter your subject. And then for the form input, you will take the classes that we already provided. If I save it and come here, you can see now this is where the person can enter the topic that they want to discuss with us. After I've done that, I will add now the text area. So I'll just come after this input and then add this text area. The label is SR only for screen readers. And then I've given it an ID of comment. I've also given it the same class of form input, and then I've given it an ID plus a placeholder. Another important thing is the rows here. I've given it 3 rows by default, so it spans for 3 rows. If I save that, you can now see we have this section, and this has at least 3 rows. We're going to finalize with this button that on hovered upon, it changes in terms of how it transitions. So let's see how we can create that. So for the button, I'll also come just below the text area and then add this. I've created a div, and then I've given it text right, so it aligns the text to the right. And then once I've done that, I have given it a type of submit. So once the button is clicked, it submits this particular form. And then for the classes, I've given it a btn of primary, but let me show you the classes for that so we can discuss them. So I've given it an inline block, and then a padding X of 20 pixels, a PY of 2.5, rounded corners. I've given the text is 14 pixels, a cursor pointer, so when I point on it, it turns into a cursor, and then select none, outline none, transition all, and then for the transition, I've given it a duration of 500, and then on focus, I want the outline to change to none. On the same focus, I want the ring to be 0, so it has no ring, and then on the same focus, I want the link offset to be 0, and then on hover, now I want to create a translation effect, so it translates vertically in Tailwind CSS Y 1.5. So this is the actual, basically the actual code, -6 pixels. So that's the translation. And then I've given it a background of red 500 and then a text of white. But you can see this is also a lot of styling. And if we have multiple buttons that have the same styling, then it's just very important to copy this, and then we'll add a button primary. Let's say this is our button primary, and then we can create now styles for buttons that look like this. And then right here, it's where I'm going to add my button styles text. So it's the same code that we discussed earlier, but now we've created a button primary class, and then we've added all the classes with the apply tag here. And then if I save this and then go back here, you can see here we've added the btn primary. And if I go to my browser, then you can see that we have this particular button. Now, the good thing is, all this while we've been developing a form that is enabled for the dark version. So to enable the dark version for this form, what I'll just do is come at the top here and give it a class of dark. If I go back, now you can see this has the dark version. Now, if this is your first time doing this in Tailwind CSS, you may also need to go to tailwind.config.js and then add this intro here, dark mode, and add the class attribute or the class text here. And what this does is it gives you the chance to change either if you want to use dark mode or light mode by just switching the classes like we've done here. So that is all I had for you in this tutorial. And like always, feel free to like and subscribe so that you get notifications whenever we post other new content. Otherwise, have a great time.